Hey, what's up, guys? It's Guiltspire here, and welcome back to Champions of the Fog. Hope you all are having a wonderful Saturday afternoon. Today we have a match between Torment and Cerebral Assassins. Very, very excited to have Torment join Champions Fog here, so very interested to see what they bring to the table. But today I am also joined by my co-host Joker. How you doing today, Joker?
Hey, what's up, man? I'm doing pretty good. How are you, man?
Pretty good, pretty good. Cannot complain. Just got done with my Survive with Friends Saturday stream. This is our last match of the day for COTF. The last two went pretty smoothly. So, pretty excited to be back again today. And, we're actually closing out the first, or rather, season 0 of Champions of the Fog. This is, I think, one of the last 3 weeks. So, we have today. We have this coming Sunday, next Saturday, the following Sunday, and I think the Saturday after that might be the last one before finals. So we're coming to a close soon, and very excited to see who enters into the finals.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we did have some teams back out and join here as of recently, so it'll be interesting to see, as you mentioned, uh what they bring to the table. But just curious to see how the playoff race basically unfolds because I believe as of right now it's still relatively up in the air.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, still relatively up in the air. Some chances of some ties coming out into the season, so might end up into some tiebreaker matches before the beginning of finals. As a reminder, there is no real playoffs this season, though, just due to the number of teams that we have on board. But next season, hopefully, as we get more teams on board and kind of able to spread out the divisions a bit more thoroughly, we'll be able to have a official playoffs, quote unquote, and see how that goes. But with that being said, I do see these survivors rating up. Do you want to check in with Giraffe if builds have been confirmed?
Just adjusting one last thing.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Also, for those who might hear some jets in the background on my end, apparently there is an air show out here in North Dakota, so some jets flying around close by, I suppose. So if you hear that, I do apologize for that background noise, but hopefully it's not all too apparent.
Hold up, you're in North Dakota, my man? Hold
I
on,
am.
I actually have my half brother actually lives in North Dakota.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I just found that out recently because I hadn't been in touch with him for quite some time, but it turns out he's up there. And I was like, hey, that's cool.
That is pretty awesome, not gonna lie. Yeah, no, I've been here for just about a year and a half now at this point. Year and a half? Yeah, I guess it's getting closer to a year and a half. Another year will come by come March. So, getting close to that though. There's a possibility of me either moving out eventually to Texas or to Illinois, depending. Have some stuff going on where I might be picking up some work and moving out there. So it'll be interesting to say the least whether or not that comes to fruition. Also,
I
Giraffe,
gotta
after
warn
you do
you.
confirm the builds, could you do me a quick favor and make an announcement in the Discord channel that we are live on this? As I do believe I forgot to do so. Thankfully, the bot will do so as well, but probably a good idea.
Yes, I can do that. And also, builds are ready.
Perfect. In that case, let's switch over to Spectator. And looks like these survivors and killers are ready to go. So let's switch on over and see what comes to fruition. I do believe today we're starting off on Groaning Storehouse, followed by, was it? Not Suffocation Pit, Gas Heaven. I believe those are the two. So very intrigued to see what builds or what killers are brought to the table.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Gas Heaven, especially. I feel like, ooh, I don't know. I've come across a lot of like pyramid heads on that map. I've come across a lot of blights, twins, I believe, as well. So I feel like you got a bunch of different possibilities there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Gas Heaven is kind of an awkward map too at times because RNG really does determine a lot of the, strength of the survivors or the killer, because middle can sometimes be just a barren wasteland of nothingness, and sometimes it can just be pallet hell for the killer. So depending on that, it really can determine the outcome of the match.
Or you could have that one weird RNG spawn where it's like the hill in the very middle of the map, and then you've got like maybe one like little area to loop, and then the rest of it, as you said, just kind of barren. So
yeah, no, absolutely. But it is interesting to see. We do see a Blight coming in now. Looks like Cerebral Assassin's really coming out swinging, to say the least. So very, very intrigued here to see what Osaka is able to do with Blight. Blight is one of the top killers in the game. And so to see him coming out on first game here, Osaka's coming out swinging and gets a very quick first down. So, pretty good job, all things considered. And it would appear that potentially I'm no longer able to hear Joker. So, just a heads up there, Joker. I do apologize about that. Might be doing some solo commentating real quick, if that is the case. Looks like my driver decided to go in and out, and thus because of that, we'll be able to hear the game audio and hear myself, but not hear Joker in this regard. We'll have to fix that on the next match, as I do not want to do technical fixes here. But with that being said, we're seeing some very strong play by Osaka, using Blight really well around these tiles, trying to get a cheeky little mind game here on this tile, but no dice. And we do see what appears to be a noise notification off in the distance. To what that was, yet to be determined. Looks like Ruin is still up, however, as we do see that gen regressing all by its lonesome. And very possibly could have gotten hit there, but unfortunately we do end up with a pallet stun instead. Very nicely played by the Megan. And these survivors just really getting pushed off of gens left and right. Another noise notification off in the distance. Once again, not really certain what that is. It does not appear to be a 10% skill check regression or a heal miss. Just all of a sudden kind of, just out of the blue. But it does look like Osaka, once again, applying some good pressure, but just not able to really get these downs here. And surprisingly, not going for the door break. When I'm on Green Storehouse, of course, that is one of those things that you do almost immediately. But we do see Tinkerer come into play here. And 2 people were on it, meaning that the Osaka only had roughly 8 seconds in order to get it. But with that being said, looks like they're able to get enough pressure here. And realistically speaking, we'll probably be able to regress that below 70%, but sliding off of those trees and not able to really get this hit here. Really painful stuff when that happens to a Blight, but unfortunately not much can be done about it. Looks like these survivors kind of taking some time to more or less kind of reset. We do see another Tinker proc off in the distance, as well as looks like Ruin is now gone. So rough position for Blight now. We're more likely not going to see a gen pop off, and not sure if that was a thought at mind gaming that window, or if they were just attempting to kind of look around while in chase. But they were able to get the hit. We do see that pallet drop here in middle. And we do see another Tinker proc. These survivors really pushing Blight around. And Blight now has to make a very difficult choice, right? Do you go for the Tinker plays, or do you commit to the chase and attempt to get it down? And we see here that the survivor, knowing that Tinker is in play, left quite early, avoiding that hit. And I don't know, I think in this moment it might be a really difficult position for them to be in, because, with Tinker being your real benefit here with your info perk and popping your only gen regression, you're put into such a scenario to where if you chase too many Tinker procs but don't get any downs, you're going to end up losing gens left and right. So even with 3 people injured here, honestly, I would start pressuring gens and just hope that the person on the gen is injured and see if you can get it down, get a pop in play. But it looks like Meg was being a bit daring there. Another gen potentially in the background, either 10% regression or a skill check miss. All survivors injured, really great spot, but how many gens will Blight lose at this point in time? That is, I believe, now a third Tinkerer, and the other 2 that had been procced earlier had not been regressed at all. Though it does look like Blight will get a down here, and will get a pop in hand. But is it too little too late? Because that is now, let's see, is that a 4th Tinker proc? There's the one on Hill, there's the one that just got popped, the one in Pocket, the one at other Pocket, which means there should be 2 other gens about to pop momentarily here. Yeah, Blight's in a very, very delicate position, to say the least. And I don't know if they're going to be able to really stop the bleeding. There's Pocket gone. There's a locker play. Blight trying to bait that out, and they might just go for the grab instead, try and waste as much time as possible. You do see the unhook in the distance in addition to, and there's another Tinker pop on that hill. Will they just try and force it out before Blight can get there? That is the question, and let's see if it pays out in their favor. It does, and looks like Blight will whiff on that hit on hill, and Ace will get to the pallet. If I was Blight here, it might be just best to just stop the bleeding and try and force that death on Temp, currently on hook. You know, Blight really desperately trying to get this other down, and does get it on Meg. If they are able to snowball here and slug out, this could result in a huge turnaround. Unfortunately, taking a BT bait, and will end up going for the subsequent down on Claude. They should know that Nia is currently in Pocket, and looks like Firecracker attempts. Cute idea, not gonna lie. But will it really pay out here? That's a dead hard pass Blight, and Blight passes through and slides off some objects, so rough place for him to be. He might need to go for the hooks at this point on both Claude as well as Meg in order to try and save some face here. Once again, sliding off of logs, able to get some recovery though, and trying to fake out this Nia, but now everyone's back up. No hooks were able to be gotten, and I'm betting you that other Exegate is already 99. There's the grab on Nia, but no DS in hand. So Blight, I think at this point needs to cut his losses on Nia and try and go for the other Exegate, but if I was these survivors, I would just dip out now. And that is exactly what they're doing. Looks like Copy also had Deliverance in play, and I'm betting probably a DS in hand. And they're just going to go for that hatch, and out they go. 4-man escape. Flawlessly done, to say the least. So congratulations to Torment here. They played really, really well around that Blight, and they did an amazing job pressuring those gens, even while injured, I will say. So nicely done. Very impressive play by those survivors. And we're going to be jumping back to our intermission, where I'm going to do some quick technical fixes so we can hear Joker once again. But let's also back out and try and get the next lobby set up in addition to. I would ask Joker what he thinks of that match, though unfortunately he won't be able to answer right away. So let me try and fix that as soon as possible. Thank you for bearing with me real quick, guys. I do appreciate it. And Joker, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Hallelujah.
Awesome. Thank you for being patient there, Joker. You know, unfortunately, we weren't able to comment on that game, but what were your thoughts given the situation at hand? You know, what do you think came out of that match?
That whole situation was crazy. Like, it started out great for the killer. I mean, again, within like 5 seconds of the game loading in, he found someone almost immediately. Granted, they were in his corrupt zone. They wasted a good bit of time of, like, you know, just one, obviously trying to get that corrupt out of play, but then, I mean, it's Blight, to be fair. Once he finds you, it's really hard to continue the chase for very long, more times than not. But credit to them for at least being able to do that. But my God, that ending, bro. Why? I'm just like, I'm scratching my head because, like, I understand the play of wanting to slug. You've got everyone injured. The mid game for him was also really good as well because he was getting so much pressure onto them. He had so many Tinkerer procs that really he was going towards the Tinker procs and obviously getting them off the gens, which was good for him. But at the end of the day, they were able to get the gens done He had 4 people injured. He slugged 2 people. I get the idea of wanting to slug there at the end because it's like you're trying to confirm the kills and you're trying to, get that slug train going. The only unfortunate part is, one, he robbed himself of points, and 2, on top of that, both survivors got up.
Yep.
They didn't full reset from what I remember. They didn't get the full reset, but then on top of that, they managed to get everyone out, especially with the unbreakable, or not the unbreakable, the deli play at the end, excuse me. And then to find Hatch, bro. That to me was just an unfortunate series of events.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a very, very rough situation for them to be in, to say the least, and really did result in a make or break play where they had to make the choice of, do we end up, do we end up going for the slug play, trying to get, a potential 3K instead of a 0, or do we end up trying to go for, just the save face and try and stop the bleeding, all things considered. And I think that was a rough situation for them to be in. With that being said, I think they could have just gone for the 2 hooks and called it a day. Even if the deliverance play on that Nia, if they would have simply, put one person on hook, put the Nia up as well, they deliverance, you still can't get Hatch at that point. The Exegate nearby them isn't done yet. And it forces those survivors into a really awkward position. So I think that they maybe got a little bit too greedy at the end there, especially as we do see that the points ended up at, I believe, 16-50 in the favor of Torment.
It's like kind of what I said there at the end. They lost so many points that they could have potentially had if they had just gotten the hooks.
Yep.
Because I feel like it's obviously, yes, they made the gamble of wanting to go for the slugfest to get the 4K or potential 3K at least, like you alluded to, which could have been obviously really big for them, because had they secured the 3K, then obviously it'd be a different story right now. The scoreline would be much different. But the fact that they took the risk, it didn't pan out for them, and on top of that, they didn't even get the 1K.
Yep.
Because everyone got out.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I just felt like, to your point, it would have been the better play. Because, like you said, you hook those 2 survivors, and at the end of the day, you have to force the other survivors to make the play. They have to then think about, okay, do we take the 2-man out? Do we just not risk giving the killer any more points, and us maybe potentially being on the losing end, because maybe he gets a 4K if we misplay it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, realistically speaking, it's a hard decision to make when you're in that moment, especially when you're losing so much pressure on a high-tier killer. You really probably are falling underneath that pressure, and it's just kind of taking a moment and stepping back and going, okay, what can I do here to not only make sure that I get the most points, but how can I reduce the amount of points that the other team is going to get? And that's the biggest question there, right? So, with that being said, if I was them, just camping out for the 1K is enough, because you're going to rob them of upwards of, I think, the 4th escape is 12 points. So rob them of those 12 points, not to mention you get the hook state, plus the progression, plus the death hook. And even though you're not able to get that 2K for the draw, it at least closes that gap ever so slightly to try and ensure that you're not going to end up with a huge point deficit as we're seeing now. It's a 34-point game between them. So, they really do need to come back here as Survivor and kind of flip the script.
Right, and then you also got to take into consideration, they just used a Blight.
Yep.
They don't have that killer anymore in their pool to be able to use.
Yep.
So they used an A-tier killer, or an S-tier killer, even if you want
to. I was about to say S-tier, definitely S-tier in my opinion.
S-tier killer, and you come away with almost nothing.
Yep.
That's got to be demoralizing, to be completely honest. They are going to have to really, they're going to have to rebound. They're going to have to reset, go again next, whatever, phrasing or you want to put into it. It's just, they've got to rebound from that. And their survivors, like you said, they got to bring it back this round. They have to, at least in my opinion, they have to get the 4-man out. A 3-man out, I think, would still be beneficial for them, but obviously the goal here is to mirror the 4-man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just want to confirm real quick before we do give the go-ahead, Giraffe, does everything look good on Survivor and Killer side?
Everything's good.
Awesome. In that case, I'll give these teams the go-ahead. Ready up. And we'll see what Cerebral Assassins is able to bring to the table in this next match. I mean, like we said, it pretty much needs to be flawless. I think on that game, Blake got 3 hooks, maybe 4 hooks, if I'm not mistaken, by the end of it all. And so if, Cerebral Assassins is able to pretty much do the same exact thing back to back to Torment, then maybe they're able to bring this back. But the moment that, they get 1 kill, it's going to be really, really difficult for Cerebral Assassins to come back and try and at least bridge that gap between the 2 scores. Because like I said, that 4th escape is worth roughly, I think, 12 points, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Just confirming last
Just
escape is 12 points.
It was how many?
The 4th escape is 12 points.
It was 12 points? Okay, thank you. Like I said, I was pretty sure, but
Yeah.
I put all those values into the Excel spreadsheet. It looked good. Everyone was happy with it. I was like, okay, and I forget what the points are. Just, press the buttons and make it go.
Right. I'm honestly still just reeling from that. I'm trying to wrap my head around what just happened, because it's a great play on the Survivors end that they were able to get that 4-man out, and just really unfortunate for that plight.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And we are now in the match, and let's see. Or rather, who Cerebral Assassins is going up against. And it is the Pyramid Head, the Executioner himself. So,
Mr.
Executioner,
Anti-Looper.
he is arguably one of the best anti-loop killers in the game, but not just a really good anti-looper, but just some amazing ability to punish survivors on unhook strategies. Because if you're able to get them tormented and keep them tormented, you can get rid of Deliverance, BT, DS, will make it. There's so much value that you can get by putting survivors into a cage, and that's what, for me, puts Pyramid Head just a little bit ahead of killers like Nemesis. They're both really good anti-loopers, but 2 things that really go against, Nemesis is the fact just that Pyramid Head is able to pretty much get someone out of the match purely off of their cages and shorten the time to kill with Punishment of the Damned.
Yeah, these survivors, I think they're gonna have a bit of a rough time, to be honest.
It depends. It depends. We do see here these survivors that we see none of them on gens. They're taking the strategy of waiting out the Corrupt Intervention, and especially with Pyramid Head, where he's not really getting much of a benefit by just being left alone in his own little world. And if anything, that's really going to rattle Pyramid Head and put him into this mindset of, okay, where are these survivors? And almost panicking in a sense while he searches around frantically to try and get this first chase. And if these survivors can wait out Corrupt Intervention, then, they're going to get a lot of value here, because it means that Pyramid Head's going to have no clue to where they are.
Yeah, and it's obviously it's something that some teams do, others don't. And it also all depends on if, again, you're found. Because if you're found relatively quickly within the match, then obviously, killers that run Corrupt, they could still get a pretty good amount of value out of it. And whereas here, they played it perfectly. They waited it out the full 2 minutes, and now, as you mentioned, Pyramid really doesn't know where they are until just now. And we're like, what, almost 3 minutes almost into the game, roughly?
Yep, we're heading on to 3 minutes into the match now, and that's the first hit there. I mean, that gen was pretty well progressed too, so, Cerebral Assassins really making good use of their timing. But, it really now comes down to how many gens will get done before this first down here.
Yeah, because now, if you also think about it, you don't really have the play as Survivor to go into a Corrupt zone anymore, because, Corrupt's over, The killer doesn't have to play that mind game or make that choice of, oh, do I want to continue with this chase or not? They can just continue. They can go. They don't have it.
That is a factor to kind of keep in mind, that, while Corrupt is up, you can kind of bring Killer into chase in those corrupted zones, where now everything is active. It's debatable whether or not which one's better, because on one hand, the Killer can drop chase and just patrol their active gens. On the other hand, the Killer now has to not just be mindful of 3 or 4 gens based on Corrupt, which ones are active and which ones aren't, but now they have to pay attention to 7 generators at this point in time.
Yeah, so we'll obviously soon shortly see if that comes back to, you know, hinder the killer, or if that ends up being, you know, a bit of a boon for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Looks like he's already about to get a potential. Oh, that's a lot of pressure that he just got there, getting those 2 hits and the down.
Yeah, I mean, realistically speaking, that was beautifully played by Pyramid Head. He understood that they were going to go for the body block, and much like what we mentioned earlier with the anti-loop capabilities of Pyramid Head, he is also able to get some amazing double downs and or double hits in this case, where, you know, he is able to hit through survivors. There's only one other killer that's able to do similar, and that is the Plague, and that's when she's using her Vile Purge. In this instance here, Pyramid Head just has that naturally, so if you're able to get that hit and those survivors line up right, then you're in a really, really strong position.
Yeah, it's this is a strictly no fun zone if you're a survivor. You can't body block, you can't try to be overly altruistic here in that regard, because some killers, as Pyramid Head, they're able to punish it relatively easily.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I will say here, this is kind of an interesting situation, I will say, due to the fact that Pyramid Head is guarding this pocket. On Green Storehouse, more often than not, you normally don't see a lot of killers guard pockets like this, because if they do, they're going to see their middle gens get done, and they're going to see a 2-1 split on gens. It could be that Pyramid Head's just really wanting to focus down this one survivor, get them out of the game early, and apply some pressure, but we already see 2 gens finish, and I'm betting you other survivors are right now finishing up some gens. Well, actually, they're not all too far in, and if Pyramid Head's able to get to at least one of them, they'll probably stop 1 gen. But if they take chase on Ace here instead, then I'm going to say 2 gens are probably going to get finished out here.
Yeah, so it's obviously it's a heads-up play by the killer. You know, they're in their mind, like you said, they're wanting to secure this 1 kill. They get it done. They do obviously lose a few gens in the process, and it was a bit surprising that they didn't lose any more. So they're kind of a bit lucky, because I feel like other teams that noticed this play by the killer, I feel like that they would have been able to potentially get more done. So it could have honestly been a lot worse for him, but he is chasing this ace now, as you mentioned, so we'll see if he ends up going with the same approach.
Yeah, I mean, realistically speaking here, you know, Pyramid Head seems to be really focusing in on these M2s. Have we actually seen Pyramid Head M1? Yeah, we did once. I think once so far, otherwise all of them have been M2 hits so far.
Yep. Just an unfortunate narrow miss for the killer there. Just missed out on hitting that ace with the M2.
Yep, and as we mentioned here earlier, we see this 2-1 split now. So we see this pocket with 2 gens and then 1 relatively farther away. It's not too far. Honestly, if I had these survivors, I probably would have wanted to save a farther corner for their last gen. And not to mention Ace is now, you know, getting chased into that generator, which is kind of unfortunate for their team as a whole. If I was them, I would have tried to rotate over towards Shaq and towards the other pocket that had already been finished. But with that being said, you know, it'll really depend on what Ace can do here and, you know, potentially take chase for long enough to punch the Pyramid Head going, you know, really for this chase on Ace.
Yeah, and it's a good play by the ace here, because he's obviously he's made the play with the killer, as I say that he does it now, but he made the good play there because it forced the killer to make a choice. Did he want to stay in that pocket, even though it wasn't obviously necessarily a 3 gen, but as you said, it was a 2-1 split. You've got this idea then that, you know, he's super far away from his gens now, and he wasted a good amount of time, albeit yes, he did chase over towards that one gen that I believe was relatively close to being done, that actually just now gets done. So I mean, relatively speaking, that was a good play by the ace. The killer kind of got punished for wanting to get a little bit greedy there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, as we mentioned before, though, I do want to point out something, that now Cerebral Assassins is kind of into a little bit of an interesting situation. They have one person going down as we speak. We have one person already out of the game, and that's 12 points out of the survivor's pockets for all intent and purpose. Now it comes down to a question: do we let Pyramid Head have this next kill and try and draw out the match? Or do we try for the 3-man escape and try to save face and redeem some points? But if I'm Pyramid Head, I face camp this and just force the draw. And in fact, I think because he's going to get the 2 progressions, it's going to actually be points in Tormund's favor, since they're going to get more than the 2k plus 6 hooks.
Yeah, I feel like the survivors going with the 2 out was probably the best call that they could have gone with there. Because again, if you play this incorrectly, or say if you feel that you played it optimally but you ended up not because you ended up giving the killer hooks or just more pressure in general, and say that if they played it wrong, they could have gotten, it could have only been a 1-man out, or it could have been a 4K for the killer. So I feel like, to your point, they need to get as many points as possible to try to bridge this gap. And I feel like them taking the 2-man out, while limiting the number of points the killer got because of the progression stages, I think will help them, or at least somewhat help bridge that gap.
I think in this case it's more or less stopping the bleeding, though, because if you think about it this way, a 2k6 hook in COTF is a draw. Now, that was a 2k7 hook, meaning that Pyramid Head got some points. And that from the 34-point gap that they already were able to claim from the last match, now that means that they are potentially, instead of 34, they're now 38 points up. Maybe 40 points up. And because of that, it does mean that if the, killers on this team play smart and they keep on doing something like that, I mean, they can just kind of eke out this 34, 38 point lead until the very end and just kind of lock Cerebral Assassins out of the match by the time, match 4 comes out.
Yeah, it's a viable strategy for the killers as of right now, like you mentioned. So I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if they play it that way. It's also going to be interesting to see if they choose to play it safe or not, because again, they have a relatively decent gap here in terms of points. So they have a good lead. Do they choose to play a bit more safe and be like, okay, maybe just try to go as many hooks as possible, or do what we saw here, where you try to secure at least 1-2k, and maybe you're happy with that. So
yep. And actually, looking at the points right now, it actually stuck to a 34-point difference between the two teams due to the progression state. So basically, that match ended up as a draw by the end of it due to the progression point loss. So when you really look into that, it was the best play by Cerebral Assassins to, for all intent and purpose, stop the bleeding and ensure that they're not going to lose points here. That then leads that up to them on this Survivor match to try and once again bridge that gap, make it as small as possible going into match 4 to where they'll be killer again and have a little bit more control of what happens, because as a killer, you have control of how many points that the Survivor's going to get on the escape. Versus gens, you can't really control too much. You can, as we saw there, force one person out of the game, get that second hook and face cam for all intent and purpose, and draw out the match. So if Cerebral Assassins is able to bridge that gap, or if possibly even to close the gap and gain a lead, they then could really push the envelope and try for a very close match come match 4 when they're killer.
Yeah, and again, I still feel that they were, I don't know if they were maybe a bit altruistic, or too altruistic, I should say, this last match, because like we pointed out, with how the Pyramid Head there was playing, they could have potentially gotten with a 3-man out.
Yep.
And the score could be obviously a lot closer. So if they were able to have gotten more gen progress than what they did, I feel like this game could be a lot closer. But again, at the end of the day, this is where we stand, and they've got to make some kind of adjustments.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So it's going to be interesting to see what Tormund brings out here. Obviously, they brought an A-tier killer out swinging. Obviously, Cerebral Assassins as well, bringing out the Blight in Game 1. So it'll be interesting to see if they bring another A-tier or S-tier killer to try and really put the nail in the coffin, for lack of better terms, because if, in instance, Tormund is able to get a 4K here, and, you know, Cerebral Assassin's not able to get many gen points, that could be the final match, the determining match of this game. So it really is going to be down to the wire here, I do think.
Yeah, it's you're honestly, again, it's just unfortunate because of that first game of how poorly it went, that you're in this unfortunate spot where the game could basically be done here right now.
Yep, absolutely. And just want to confirm with Giraffe real quick. I did see in Discord that we seem to be good to go. Just want to confirm, though.
We're good to go.
Awesome. I'll let them know to ready on up, and we'll be going into match 3, this time on the Gas Heaven. Now, I will say one thing about Gas Heaven that I do love is its predictable spawn rotation. I do not think we're going to see the same type of play that we did last time. You know, Cerebral Assassins really did take their time, wait out Corrupt Intervention. I do not foresee that happening again here, because any killer worth their salt should know spawn locations on a select number of maps. Gas Heaven is arguably one of the most predictable. So,
yeah, I have to agree with you there.
So I very much am interested to see what Torment will do, if Cerebral Assassins will try and wait out the Corrupt Intervention. If they do, how successful will they be? So, you know, obviously we don't know if Corrupt is in play, though. I feel like it's pretty much the comp staple at this point, because as long as Corrupt is up, you know what gens you need to patrol. So I'd be shocked not to see it, but I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just such a strong perk, because, you know, it helps you as a killer gain so much early game pressure.
Absolutely. And it looks like we have a Billy here revving up that chainsaw quite early, and does get a couple of early finds. We saw, I believe that was Osaka over on the shack, and we do see Kate here on this tile throwing down that pallet early. So gonna be interesting to see here what Billy is able to accomplish with the chainsaw, and might end up getting this down, or just might rev down, and yeah, there we go.
Bit of mind gaming there, but it works out for the killer.
Yeah, I mean, there's a really good mind game, and I will say we don't have add-on blockers, and I think that's okay, because we do see low pro chains here. I feel like the Kate did play that pallet and wanted to play it a bit aggressively. Billy would have absolutely have punished that. So that was very interesting to see there, and we do see that really quick unhook. I do wonder if Osaka here has Deliverance and wanted to get that safe unhook. Whether or not that happens now is yet to be determined.
Right, yeah, that's... I don't know that I necessarily agree with going for the unhook there. Like, again, like you said, yeah, it's possible that they do have, you know, the Deliverance and they wanted to get that safe unhook, but honestly, you just gave the killer 3 points.
Yeah, I mean,
you still don't even have a gen done.
That was 3 points, you know, 2 hooks now, Undying gone, and, you know, this is a tough situation for these survivors to be in now, because they have a person that this killer now knows does not have DS, so you need to lead the killer away. And if Billy doesn't chase you, then go for generators. Stop the bleeding where possible. But now, Billy is probably in one of the strongest positions that a comp killer can be in. A down next to a hook. And that hook, not just being first stage, but now going towards death hook. So, in a very strong position.
And they just found someone else, too. Oh, this is really not good for these survivors.
It's a very, very awkward position. They're going to have to hope that Kate has BT on hand, but now Billy, once again, knowing full well that DS is not in play unless they attempted to save it, probably not the right move, is going to now get mind gamed out of this situation, and we're going to probably see another pretty quick down. And so that's going to be a very early out, and just some very aggressive play, to say the least.
Yeah, honestly, this just goes back to that really early unhook that we both, I think, can agree on was just really unnecessary. Like, for those who don't know, each singular hook, if you do not attempt to escape, is 60 seconds. So it takes 60 seconds to go from one progression to the next. And you literally unhooked them within, I think, what, 5 to 10 seconds? 15 maybe, of them being hooked? Like, you could have let them get on the hook and stay there a bit longer and force the play by the killer. Because then at that point, the killer then has to choose, okay, am I going to camp? Am I going to, just stay around this relative, area and kind of just proxy and get this one person out? Or am I going to, feel carefree in the world and just go off and, try to put that pressure elsewhere?
Yeah, no, it's a difficult decision to make as a killer, realistically speaking, in comp play, because you want to be able to pressure that unhook, right? But if survivors are working efficiently, every generator takes 80 seconds. And so, if, in instance, the killer is proxying, wanting to get that early kill, by the time that 120 seconds, that's first hook to death hook, that would be upwards of 3 generators done by the survivors. And then, if they wanted to, be on 3 separate generators, all the way half done by that point in time, meaning that no matter what, they would be able to get at least 5 gens done by the time that hook was, that person on hook was dead. So I think that they probably played a little bit too aggressively on that hook. I'm going to bet you that Osaka does have Deliverance, and maybe you might find that out here as they'll be going up on hook momentarily.
Yeah, to your point, it's a difficult call to make, but I agree 100%. It was just a bit too aggressively by the survivors here. And again, it's just they're at 3 gens left right now.
Yep.
So all things considered, yep, Osaka, he did, as you mentioned, he did have Deliverance. It's a questionable play because, again, at the end of the day, we're going to keep harping on it. They have very little gen pressure right now, and it's because they've been on the back foot essentially from the get-go.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful flick there by Hillbilly there, and that'll be another hook. And it's just really showing you that not only is this Hillbilly just really knowledgeable on how to use him mechanically, but is just able to apply a lot of even pressure across the map. And I would argue, I can't say for certain, definitely has some comp experience.
Yeah, I would probably have to agree with you there. I mean, this killer is doing a pretty damn good job. I mean, they're just able to really kind of do whatever they want. They know they have this match basically in control. Like, this is all up to them on how it plays out.
Yeah, I would fully agree with you here. I think they can kind of take their time, ensure that chases are short as necessary. I think at this point, SCA is just really needing to, stop the bleeding, get as many gens as possible, and if they're able to get down to the last 2 and Billy gets a little bit overzealous, even potentially, try for a hatch escape to just try and get some points here. So I think that might be the right play, all things considered.
Yeah, I will say the ace here did manage to at least stop the bleeding momentarily, because that was a relatively long chase, and they did manage to, in that span, get the den done and get the unhook. So it's not terrible at the end of the day. It's obviously still going to be really close, but I still personally feel that this Billy kind of has the game in hand. It's going to be extremely difficult for these survivors to bring it back, because as you said, it could just, at this point, you're probably looking at a 1K, or not a 1K, excuse me, a 1-man escape and a potential just hatch game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that's probably the best case scenario for these survivors, is trying to get that hatch escape. I mean, any comp killer with their salt, though, knows full well to ensure that you slug out for the 4K if you really do want to maximize your points. So I imagine we'll probably see that here. And it looks like these survivors maybe learning from their initial situation and not going for that unhook on Osaka. And I think at this point, Billy's probably going to just kind of hang around and wait for the death hook. I mean, all he has is roughly 10 seconds, maybe less. I think this is the right move, just force the kill. But 2 survivors left. The only downside of this is now hatch will spawn, meaning that these survivors do have a chance of trying to go for a hatch escape if, in the instance, this Billy is willing to even give them that chance.
Yeah, it's you're kind of, like you said, you're in a bit of a rough spot if you're Cerebral Assassins here for the survivors. Like, you really just try to need to try to get as much point as physically possible. Obviously, you're not going to get that many points considering the fact that there's only 3 of you alive right now. And soon to be potentially 1, but you got to try to get something, because otherwise this is just going to get much worse.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it really comes down to now is what perks are left in the match. You know, obviously every survivor's able to bring 1 perk each, you know, that is unique to them, with the exception of ET. I am curious to see whether or not we do see a Unbreakable still in play, and interested in taking a quick peek while Billy's here. And it does appear that as soon as we did check, we see a Soul Guard Unbreakable play. Not too shabby. I would argue that it may have been a smarter move to hold on to that, depending, because if Billy was going to, let's say, pick up on that one guy D after this down, then maybe you could potentially have gone for the Hatch Escape. But now, since Billy knows, okay, there's still 2 people up, we're going to see a slug play here on D, and then they're going to go immediately back over for Yoon thereafter.
Yeah. It's honestly, like you said earlier, it's a bit of a tough call there, because it's, do you force the killer to wait, or do you just go ahead and make the gamble, make the play now, use the Unbreakable, and try to play the killer's hand? Unfortunately, they played the killer's hand, they did it too early, and here they're about to get the slug for the 4K.
Yeah, I think that even if they would have waited, because I imagine Billy, what the most kills would do is say, okay, I just slugged that one person over by garage. I'm going to let them be slugged there. I'm going to go back for my other slug. And even if you did that and you saw them doing so and you could call it out, that puts the killer into a very awkward position then. Okay, you know, they just Unbreakable with the slug here. Do I pick up this slug or do I go over for the other slug? And so that way, you know, if they decide to try and go for you where you were, you could then potentially rotate back over to the other down survivor and try and get a pickup in a timely manner. I also say Billy is looking around frantically for a hook. It is possible that they might be able to get out of their grasp, but it's going to be a close one. I'm kind of curious to see. Oh, close but no cigar.
Yeah, that's extremely unfortunate there. And it's kind of like what we alluded to. The Cerebral Assassins, you needed a strong showing here for the survivors. And unfortunately, you're not leaving away with that. You still had 2 gens left, which means there was still points that could have, you know, definitely benefited you. But this just snowballed from the very beginning, and I think we can both agree that it all starts with that unhook that was just way too early.
Yeah, I definitely think it was a big factor, no doubt about that. And I think that, you know, as the game progressed, Billy was just able to consistently apply even pressure to these survivors. And really just sticking to the same strategy that they did in the last round of making sure to get someone out of the game early.
Yeah, it's almost heartbreaking, because it's like you had such you knew you had to come into this game and at least, in my mind, at least get a 2-man out. 3-man out, you know, that's obviously, it would have been ideal, because then you would have given yourself a really nice position to be able to, despite the killer obviously getting a lot of good hooks here, that you would have had a good potential to bring this game back. And I'm not gonna, obviously, I'm gonna wait until we hear from excuse me, from Giraffe for the confirmation of like the score, but this kind of honestly puts the game out of reach.
Yep. No, it does. There's no way to look at it. There's a 34-point gap before the match began, and in order to keep that 34-point gap, Cerebral Assassins needed a 2-man out on 6 hooks, or a 3-man out on one with a 1K for Billy. And we obviously did not see that happen, which means that at the very least, Torment widened that gap, and really was able to ensure that this last match is probably going to be null and void for Cerebral Assassins, meaning that, you know, Torment is going to kind of be able to take a step back, relax, take a breather, and, you know, pretty much leave this match here knowing that they have the victory.
Yeah, and with them being Rivers this time around, like you said, it's just they don't have a worry in the world. They're good. You know, there's no sweat on their back. They don't have to worry about a potential comeback. They don't have to worry about some misplays here or there or whatever. And for all intents and purposes, you can honestly just kind of meme this last round and you're good
Yeah.
because you don't have to worry about it. You know.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, right now, looking at the score from Giraffe, it is currently 54 to 132, a 78-point difference. So when you take that into consideration, where the killer at max can get 56 points, that was the nail in the coffin and the swan song for Cerebral Assassins. So unfortunately, the Fat Lady has sung, and we'll be seeing what Cerebral Assassins brings in on this last match, whether they determine to bring, a throwaway killer, or maybe just bring in a substitute, someone who doesn't, play often, to kind of get some comp practice. Because I think this would be a great opportunity whenever I see these type of scenarios to where there is, for lack of a better term, a blowout. I think it's a great scenario to bring in someone on your roster who doesn't get a lot of killer experience, a lot of survivor experience, and kind of throw them into the fire and see how they fare. So I think that is, probably a good idea in that regard.
Yeah, and it's also another thing to think about as well because as you mentioned, the game's over. So you've got one team that basically they can use a throwaway killer, as you mentioned. They could go that route. Still going to bring a good killer in, just try to get them that comp experience, like you mentioned, someone that maybe doesn't get to play a whole lot, and it's just kind of sad a little bit as well if you're the survivors or if you're Cerebral Assassins, because like the game was winnable, but unfortunately games 1 and 3 did not play out as you would have liked.
I wouldn't use the modifier sad there. Realistically speaking, I think in comp, whether it's pubs or comp, I think we all know that there isn't a possibility to win every match. And realistically speaking, as I preach time and time again on my own stream, this game is survivor-sided. If a team plays efficiently, they should be able to escape without a doubt, realistically speaking. And I think in this case, it's more or less just a learning experience. And if I was Cerebral Assassins, I wouldn't walk away with this and go, really beat myself up. I would kind of look at it a bit more closely and go, okay, what can we do better? What did we do wrong? And I think that is a big factor there that they can kind of take away from this and go, okay, maybe we were too aggressive on that first hook. Maybe we could have theoretically have waited and baited the killer out to ensure that they weren't going to, going to punish that unhook. We saw the deliverance. That was a really great thing to get that deliverance early. But it meant that the killer just had to take a 25% chance of hitting DS, and they took it and they won that gamble. So I think in this regard, it just shows that they still have a lot to learn, and that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I'll personally, at least, think that, while yes, the game may be a bit more survivor side and stuff like that, there's still a bunch of people out there that are killers that are just extremely good. And whether or not you play survivor effectively or not, I still feel that killers can more times than not come out on top regardless. But I feel like at the end of the day, you make a really, really good point though, because it's still what can they do better next time? Because obviously this time around they didn't play it as optimally as they would have wanted. Because like as we pointed out, quite a few different scenarios where it would have been better to make a certain play, or it would have been better to do, this versus what they ended up doing. So I feel like that will definitely help them moving forward to be like, okay, I think we know now what we need to do, and if we try to, as you said, for example, try to bait out the killer to, get that safe unhook, and say if they're not doing that, say they're just, hard kind of just proxying a certain area, trying to force the survivor's hand, then it's like, okay, what do we do in this situation? Well, we already know kind of probably what we should be doing, because we've already been in this situation.
Exactly. And that's the biggest thing, is that for every loss, you walk away with more information. You walk away with a new strategy, more thoughts on what could be done differently. And so that's the biggest thing there, right? Is figuring that out, and the nice thing about these matches that are streamed, whether that be by us over here on COTF or by yourselves, it really does give you that perspective and ability to look back at it and go, okay, what could have been done differently? And you'll say, okay, well, we can see from this perspective, here's what the killer was thinking, here's what the killer was doing, especially with that last match, to where they pretty much did a very similar play style as the match before, to where they did camp out to get that first kill very early. And that's I would say, a relatively popular strategy by comp killers, and I think that's where most survivors need to really make accurate callouts of, okay, are they camping? If so, okay, what do we do now? Do we try and force the unhook, or do we just sit on gens and let them die? And I think, honestly, if I was any survivor team, even if they get that second hook state or they try and force the death hook, if I can crank out 3 gens in that time and then another half a gen on top of which, I think that's much more worth your time than attempting for the unhook and then trading down, which we saw there.
Yeah, it's just, I feel it's also a bit interesting as well because you have I don't even know if you want to call it a mindset, or maybe it's just more of a general uh, ideology, maybe, or necessarily, but it's like, a lot of survivor teams, they want to be altruistic.
Yes.
They don't want to be the person that is on the hook and doesn't really get that help of trying to get off, or to continue to play, because let's be real, just about every single person that's played this game, whether they're a survivor or a killer, has been in that situation.
Yep.
Almost exclusively. Like, they know the idea of being the first one found, downed, and hooked, and not getting to play the game for the rest of for the rest of that match. It sucks. It really does. But obviously, we're in a comp experience. It's gonna happen, and as survivors, it's sometimes difficult to bridge that gap of, okay, how can we play this optimally? How can we be altruistic but objective at the same time? Because,
Yep.
like you said, and like we always kind of try to harp on as, a good point to get across, if someone is doing that, if the killer is proxying or just hardcore, just like in their face, they're not really hardly moving, they're trying to force that death, you gotta try at that point then, as much as it may pain you, you gotta get the gens done. Because at that point, like you said, it just puts your team at a better position. And again, it's gonna suck regardless if you're that person on the hook. Like, it's kind of the unfortunate circumstance of being in that situation, but you gotta give your team the best chance to win at that point.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, that strategy, I would argue, is still applicable to pubs. If you're swiffing up in pubs and you know that a killer is camping, I do it all the time in mine. We had a great situation the other day where Bubba camped, and so we're like, okay, let's just work on gens. And as Bubba or a killer, sees gens pop and pop and pop and pop, they then have to go in their mind, okay, am I waiting here too long? Am I giving them too much pressure? And I think that's really what it's about at that moment, is that if you dedicate yourself to doing so, then you're putting yourself into a scenario to where you have to make a decision. Am I giving them too much pressure? And I think that is a big factor there, to where if you don't take that into consideration, then you're going to do yourself as a disservice, survivor side, where you're not pressuring that killer to make a choice.
Yeah, and some killers are okay with that. Obviously, you could make the argument, it's pubs versus comp scene. It's a bit different in terms of, like, in pubs, most killers are probably okay with it because, that's maybe just how they play, or, that's who they are as a person, or their, like I said, their play style or whatever. And then in comp, it's just like, if they do that, they're kind of, like you said, they're at that point where it's just like, okay, if I see all these gens pop, am I sticking around too long?
Yep.
And then they kind of, they might panic a little bit. Some might, some might not. Or it's just like, okay, now I gotta make a decision. Do I stay here and commit to what I've already done, or do I attempt to try to fix it?
Yep.
and try to get as much pressure and try to get, try to bring this back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think, if that being said, we're moving into this last match here. And I am curious to see what Running Man's going to be bringing to the table. I'm very curious, what their, for all intents and purposes, throwaway killer is going to be. There's a lot of options, realistically speaking.
Yeah.
Anything from Trapper to, as much as people will say no, to Trickster and others, to where, they'll be able to kind of bring this in and I just play a game through and get that comp experience and kind of get more practice in against this team because, it's possible that in Season 1 they might play against Torment again and they'll want that experience and be able to say, okay, here's how they played last time. Let's work around that this time around. I think that's one of the amazing things. We saw that a lot in Vigo's court, especially because I think that teams got to play each other more often than we have here. We opted for a shorter Season 0. So, everyone in the Saturday division is only going to play each other once. So it'll be interesting to see how people change their strategies, being able to look back at the footage, quite literally, and, see what the strategy of those teams were in that moment, and if they have changed or if not, being able to use that against them.
It also brings to light a situation that most people tend to maybe not necessarily be in, where, like you said, right now we could potentially see them just bring a throwaway killer, and for all intent and purposes, we could see them frag out. Like, they could do really well, or you could, again, see it from the Survivor side as well and be like, okay, maybe they play a lot together, or maybe these people just don't get that much playtime in general, and they might do really well against, whatever killer that that they bring to the table, and be like, okay, and then from there you're able to gauge where your team is at a little bit in terms of roster depth.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, and looks like we are going to be jumping into this match right now, and let's take a look and see who it is, and it is a Legion. By the way, is that a new knife? Is that the neon knife?
I believe so.
Ooh, I might want that. I just noticed that. I haven't seen that yet, but it is a Legion here, and so we already see them quite early in a chase. Let's see if they're able to make this hit in time. We do see a firecracker attempt to try and knock them out of their power, but no dice. And looks like Running Man's going to be a little bit aggressive here with Legion and opting to go for the quick fatigue out and try and get a quick down on Nia, but Legion saying, okay, I think I've spent enough time now. Let's jump on to another chase. Try not lose gens this early on, especially with no Corrupt Intervention as we have seen here yet.
True. Yeah, it's I will say I really like the fact that they run Thanatophobia here, because in my opinion there's a few killers that you can kind of run Thanatophobia and it'd just be extremely effective. Legion being one of them, obviously, because of the ability to be able to put multiple people into the men's state at the same time, and then obviously on top of that, then they have to heal themselves. So they're getting, if they're able to, another good one obviously is Plague, just because of her power alone and being able to put people into the broken state. It's so much pressure for the survivors. They have to be like, okay, we have to reset. We have to take the time to do that. Otherwise, we are slowing ourselves down tremendously of being able to put pressure on the gen.
My only concern here, though, is the playstyle that Running Man's going with, right? Running Man, as you saw there in both chases, utilized Fatal Frenzy to try and get the quick injure, then make up distance, fatigue out, but did not go for anyone else. I'm not sure if that's because they didn't hear anyone on Killer Instinct or what, but that means that they're only getting, 4 seconds added on each generator for Thanatophobia. And the beauty of Legion is the fact that with Ruin, you can really gain a ton of value due to the fact that when they're doing that 12-second self-mend, that's 12 seconds off of gens, where gens are regressing for X amount of time, because if survivors want to jump on them, their mend is going to go down tremendously, and really is going to end up punishing themselves in the long run.
Yeah, it's a good thing that you mentioned that. It was something that I was actually going to bring up as well. He's playing this very interesting. Like you said, he's really not going for anyone else whenever they're in the Fatal Frenzy.
And I will mention here that was a very cheeky play there by the Nia trying to mend in front of Legion body blocking, and I feel like Running Man here kind of fell into that killer mindset where they pretty much just saw a survivor and swung. I do it all the time when I'm like an insta-down killer like Bubba. I'll see a killer around the corner, I'm like, oh, piece of candy, and just whack them immediately when I could have just chainsawed down them instead. And, you know, unfortunately ended up frenzying themselves out of their ability because they hit someone who was already fully mending at that point.
Yeah, that was really, really well done by them. And now, as we're seeing it, he's starting to get a little bit more value because he's instead of continuing the chase on one person, he's seeing that other people aren't in, you know, that mend state, and now they're able to put more pressure onto the survivors, and thus making their repair speed and everything that much slower.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know, there's only 2 gens left at this point in time. You know, do we think that at this point they're able to really capitalize off this? Yeah, there's 12 seconds roughly added to each generator right now, with Nanophobia on, for all intent and purpose, 3 stacks. But at this point in time, I bet you that these survivors are going to be able to very easily reset, jump on gens, and I bet you by the time that Legion gets a hook, I bet you a gen's going to be at 70%, if not finished. Let's actually take a look and see that bet. We see 1 gen at 50, and we see, no, 1 gen at 50, 1 gen at 25, give or take. And so Legion is able to apply a little bit of pressure here, but just not getting a lot of value out of their ability.
Yeah, and it's a good thing that you mentioned that as well, because, you know, if there had been less gens done and more gens that needed to be done, then I feel like the Legion here would have been in a very good spot. But
yeah,
obviously that's not the case. As you mentioned, there's only 2 gens left. And this, I believe, is the second or third hook that they've gotten? Second. So, obviously, Legion not being one of the best killers in the game, but I feel like Running Man here could have been playing this, I think, a bit more optimally than he is right now. Now, to be fair, he is getting decent value still with Ruin, because Ruin is still up, and he's managing to chase a few survivors off, while still getting some Thanatophobia value. But it's going to be interesting to see if he continues to play this way, or if he's going to mix it up a bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I will say, you know, maybe the pressure's starting to get to these survivors, but we are seeing them starting to, you know, end up in really short chases. We are seeing them start to fall down, and Running Man trying to figure out where he's going to bring the survivor. I was about to say, I was kind of surprised he's going to commit to that chase in Garage due to the fact that he had not opened up door yet. And so it's going to be kind of interesting to see if that survivor's going to be able to capitalize on that. Obviously not the case here. But now he needs to make a choice. There are 2 generators that were being worked on prior, and he needs to figure out which one they are at. And it looks like he's going to be trying to make a quick dash over here, but finds no one's home. Wow, that is actually a little bit surprising, not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's it could be the survivors just recognizing that, you know, they're at a decent spot right now. The killer obviously doesn't have that very many hooks against them. No one, I believe, is really on death hook. If I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but they're at a decent spot right now where they should know that the only thing that's left in play for the killer right now is Ruin and Thanatophobia. So they're really just not in a bad spot. It's just they really need to try to force the killer here to commit to them, like it seems that he is as of right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is kind of a good chase to die on here, realistically speaking, because it means that Legion really had to take the time to commit to this. And I think the survivors are at this point, they know they've already won. We saw them trying to go for that flashlight save rather than, you know, committing 2 gens. And I think at this point, if 1 gen left, the game's already locked up tight. They're just kind of playing around at this point and seeing what damage they can do, have some fun during this comp game. And, you know, Running Man definitely starting to recollect himself in this match. But inevitably, you know, it'll be interesting to see what the end result of this is.
Yeah, and it's something that is never really, I think, looked at all too often in games like this. So obviously the survivors here, they're in a really good spot. You know, they've won the match. This game is kind of more or less in hand as of right now. But at the same time, they really don't for all intent and purposes, want to start creating bad habits, basically. Like, they don't want to be in games like that maybe, you know, are a bit tighter in terms of score, and they don't want to have to end up like potentially picking up these bad habits playing this way just because, yes, it's a bit of a throwaway thing. So you want to ideally try to, obviously, you want to have as much fun with this game as possible, but you also don't want to, like I said, just pick up on those bad habits.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, that's fair. I feel like they're probably not, obviously, flashlights, since you are only allowed one tool each, so one medkit, one toolbox, one firecracker, and one flashlight. Obviously, you know, some teams are trying to be a bit more aggressive with flashlights at certain points of time. I think if there's any time to do so, now, of course, is that time.
That's fair, yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's what they're doing here, and we do see them on Gen on Hill, I do believe. We do see that all these survivors are injured at this point, and that does mean that, you know, that is roughly 16 seconds additional on every single generator. And, you know, Legion doing a relatively good job of kind of a hook relay race at this point, trying to apply as much pressure as possible to these injured survivors. I'm not sure if they're just refusing to stay healthy, or if they're just trying to apply as much pressure in the meanwhile, kind of trying to cut through Thanatophobia where they can.
Yeah, it's a good point as well, because that could be the game plan. Maybe they're just like, okay, we know Thanatophobia is going to slow us down, and maybe in their mind, it's a better play to just, you know, let it slow them down, just push through it. It just depends on, you know, what the call necessarily is, and that could be what their call is now. But like you said, Running Man, he did manage to bring it back a little bit. Obviously, the game is, the match itself is obviously over. But, you know, you're still kind of playing for pride. You're still trying to, like you said, potentially get some more comp experience and just good experience under your belt. So it's good to see that he's at least able to bring it back a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, realistically speaking here, you know, we're seeing some good chases, all things considered. And I think they're trying to get that last gen done, but Running Man just applying enough pressure here to where they're not able to make it work. You know, I bet you as Running Man gets back to that gen, we're going to see a survivor on it. And of course, that is the case. And Ruin just doing a really good job. I honestly think that they might be overcommitting to this gen and should probably be on one of the other, two gens out there in the wild to try and close up the match at this point in time.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I'm a bit confused that they are overly committing to this gen. It's a bit of an interesting call. Like, again, the gen only looks like it's about like 50 or 60%, and as you mentioned, the other two gens are a bit farther out. So, I mean, realistically speaking, you should be able to get more pressure onto either like the furthest gen here that the killer's going to right now, or that gen right next to, I don't even know what you call it, like the big rig, the big truck.
Yeah, and I
so
think that's what they decided to do. I think one thing that they're doing well and doing smart is that by pressuring one gen and having one person on it at a time, you're forcing the killer to always go back to that gen. Meaning that if someone has now rotated to, let's say, the generator on that far side that Meg was on, now they're going to be able to ensure that, you know, now there's pressure on this gen, Meg escapes, they finally get the generator. And I think, you know, they were doing a kind of touch and go play here to where they were trying to just draw attention to one place, draw that killer away when he goes for the chase, rinse, repeat, and kind of eke out value. Did it work in the long run? Yes. Do I think they could have probably ended that match a little bit sooner? Probably. You know, it really depends on what their game plan was. Hard to say as we're not on their comms. But it looks like they're going to just opt for that two-man out at this point in time. And I think that is arguably the smart play.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's a very interesting way of doing it for that last gen, and like you said, I definitely agree. I feel like that they could have for sure gotten have finished this game a lot sooner than what it did, but I also agree here that the two-man out is arguably the best call here. But as I say that,
yeah, I'm not sure what Lori's doing here. Maybe she knows where Hatch is potentially, or she maybe. Potentially, she's kind of in the mindset of, hey, let's go on one last chase. You know, we're not here for points. We already got the win. Let's play a game. But looks like that game was cut a little bit short there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not quite sure what the reasoning was there, but it could have been like you said. Maybe just some extra chases, extra trying to get a little
Either
bit
that
more.
or I wonder. I'd have to double check. I wonder if they had Deliverance.
Oh, that's
No,
actually
no, they didn't. They tried to Kobe. I'm not sure. That's a good question. No, they tried to Kobe, so no Deliverance. If they had Deliverance, that would actually been a little bit of a BM. Imagine Deliverance with DS and just crawls out at that point. I mean, it could have been a possibility. It could have been a possibility.
It could have, but yeah, no, that definitely would have been a bit of BM. I agree.
But with that being said, that there will be the end of round 5. Torment versus Cerebral Assassins. Torment coming up on top, I do believe, by a significant sum. That last match, of course, kind of closing the gap a little bit, but probably upwards of, I would guess, a 70-some point lead in favor of Torment at this point in time.
The score was 155 to 101 in favor of Torment.
Okay, so roughly a 50-point match by the end of that, so fair play, fair play. Well, with that being said, congratulations, Torment. That is your first match of Season 0 on COTF, so congratulations to you. Thank you much for joining us today, and looking forward to seeing Torment play again next week. But with that being said, we will be ending the stream here. But before we do, as always, Joker, if everyone wanted to come say hi over on your stream, where could they find you?
Yes, sir. Well, my stream link is twitch.tv/GodsWarrior88. That's normally where I stream. That's also usually because, I'm streaming a lot of like our practices or just like other things in general, but always a good time over there.
Absolutely. And I am Mark, aka Guiltspire. I'm over on twitch.tv/Guiltspire. That is GILTSPIRE. I'm an educational Dead by Daylight player, so if you're looking for some tips and tricks, I'm the place to be. But with that being said, good games to Torment and Cerebral Assassins. We will see you both next week. On that note, guys, we'll see you next time. Actually, not next time, tomorrow for some more matches of COTF. Looking forward to seeing the Sunday Division. But on that note, bye-bye!